Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm of Abercrombie and Sanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Samuel Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It is not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast, and extending you holiday wishes and happy Thanksgiving. And with me, as always, is the McCartney to my John Lennon, is Sam Sanchez.
I love it. I love Paul McCartney. That's great.
So, anyway, let's talk a little bit about our topic of today. Let's talk a little bit about, do you have any good tidbits in the news today, or?
Yeah, I would tell you, obviously, we're in the time of year where people are always wanting to contemplate and celebrate the holidays. And so I thought as a lead in to what we're going to talk about today, we might spend some quality time talking about crazy things that happen at the holidays. One, obviously, shopping extravaganzas. People tend to spend a whole lot more money than they would plan on. Expensive gifts. On record, check this out, Bryan. I know that you're going to buy this for your wife. $2.8 million pair of socks. $2.8 million pair of socks. Of course, these are famous socks. They're worn by Michael Jackson when he first did the moonwalk. But I'm just going to tell you, $2.8 million, brother. I got a lot more reasons than a pair of just sticky socks. I don't care who.
That's true. An old pair of, they are some famous socks, though. It's an old pair of sneaky socks for $2.8 million.
Yep. I can think of a couple. That is something. People want to spend money on all kinds of things. I take that. It's tongue in cheek, but I do think that the holidays tend to always bring in, they call it the silly season for a reason, right? People just tend to get silly. It's like sometimes their brains stop working. Things get all kinds of confused, whether you're fighting with somebody in the parking lot over the last parking space at the mall, or, you're just kind of like in this kind of euphoric state of the holidays.
Well, that's true. Based on the line that I see wrapped around the local Louis Vuitton store near my house, people do get crazy around the holidays.
That they do, especially paying those prices for a purse. But
that said,
exactly. I do think it's a great topic, obviously, to touch on the craziness that can ensue. When you've been through the divorce process, Bryan, you've been through, whether you were married, not married, you have children, that when it comes around the holidays, it's a special time of year. Everybody wants to spend time with their family.
Especially during what I would call the Santa years, when the kids are a little bit younger, they're still experiencing the magic of Christmas. That's always an important and special time.
Agreed. And I think in that, when you're talking about parents who have separated or no longer living together, whether they be divorced or never been married, never lived together, you're going to talk about a possession schedule, right? And one of the most confusing parts of anyone's possession schedule is typically the portion that deals with the holidays.
Oh, absolutely. I've done more litigation over the holidays and going in and out of court right before Christmas or right after Thanksgiving or right before Thanksgiving to litigate these things than I care to talk about. So let's break it down. Let's say you're in Texas and you are going through a divorce. What can you expect from the holiday possession schedule?
Sure. So in Texas, we have a codified possession schedule. What I mean by that is that it's already kind of written into a portion of the statute that's a guaranteed minimum time for parents.
And I didn't mean to interrupt, but this goes for anybody. I mean, whether you have primary custody or don't have primary custody, it doesn't really matter in terms of the holiday possession. Is that correct?
That is correct, Bryan. Great point. And so basically, as you go through, there's going to be fundamental rights. We've kind of touched on those in previous podcasts, which was just basically, these rights and duties. But a separate kind of parallel railroad track that runs along those is possession and access. In a standard possession schedule in Texas, we have a holiday exchange schedule. It's usually going to alternate between parents. So one parent will have odd years Thanksgiving, the next parent will have even years Thanksgiving. If you have Thanksgiving in your even or odd year, then typically in that same year, you're not going to get the first week of Christmas break. And so it offsets. Basically, those exchange periods will begin and end at the time school dismisses for the holiday. And then the normal possession schedule will resume upon school resuming at the end of that holiday.
And normally you're going to get from the time school lets out, so if there's an early release, and I know for kids, there's usually an early release the Friday before the week of Thanksgiving, and then the kids are usually off for the entire week of Thanksgiving, and then they don't go back till the following Monday. So typically you're going to have from the time school lets out until the time school goes back. So that's a fair amount of time. And then the exchange for that, then what happens when we roll up to Christmas break?
Well, and so let's talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that I always try to explain to clients is there's a lot of simple ways. They're very simple things that you can do. So during the divorce process, as you're contemplating what do I want life to look like after divorce or after the entry of a suit affecting parent-child relationship order, what does that possession schedule look like? Well, exchanging at schools makes things really easy. Right? Because you know that your week before the holiday begins, if it's not your holiday, is going to end when you drop off at school. And typically in a Texas order, and even not, let's say in Florida, it's not going to be by statute, but it's something that you should contemplate and incorporate into any possession schedule, is how do holidays get extended by the school calendar? Because you and I both know, Brian, it would be great if schools had the same calendar year in and year out, but they change them all the time. They're teacher in-service days, they extend the holiday, they shorten the holiday, they make it a half day. It can really confuse parents.
Well, the other thing to contemplate also if you're going through this process is if let's say you're not Christian, let's say you're Jewish, or let's say you're Muslim, or you follow some other religion, you have to contemplate those various religious holidays that fall around, this time of the year for whatever religion you choose to practice. I mean, that's an important factor to take into consideration because obviously, different religions have different days that are important and holy days for their particular religion.
Oh, absolutely, Brian. And, that's one of the things that as a smart lawyer, a good lawyer and a good client, you want to have those conversations between one another to make sure that you're encompassing all those kinds of special periods of possession in the underlying order and contemplate those odd shifts in days. As an example, if you're coming into Thanksgiving week and there's a teacher in-service day on the Friday before the break begins. So technically, for all intents and purposes, while the kids don't have school, it's not part of the Thanksgiving holiday. Who gets that day? Right? These are the kinds of things that completely frustrate parents, can send a relationship completely sideways that's normally good because no one can figure out in their order, if it's not well drafted, what to do.
And I want to say that doesn't come up that often, but unfortunately it does. And I think that very issue came up last year because I think they had an in-service day either right at the close of Christmas break, or I'm going to call it the winter break or the Christmas holiday break, or they had one right at the tail end of Thanksgiving, at the beginning of Thanksgiving. I can't remember exactly, but that caused a lot of consternation for a lot of folks.
Sure, it's a lot of heartache, and it's unnecessary because the last thing you want to be spending your money on when you intend to buy the $2.8 million pair of socks is your lawyer in advance of a holiday weekend because you guys can't figure out whose day it should be and everybody's got plans.
And so if you have the Thanksgiving possession schedule, and you've got Thanksgiving, let's say you're in an even year and you got the Thanksgiving, you're Joe Smith and I got my kids on Thanksgiving. What happens to me at Christmas time or around the holiday, winter break when school lets out?
Sure. Presupposing, of course, that they have a standard possession schedule or a modified standard possession schedule, or they're following the language in the standard possession schedule. The parent who is not in possession during the Thanksgiving holiday usually gets the first week of Christmas break. So that's typically from the time school dismisses at Christmas break until noon on December 28th.
And that's a key factor because that if you want a little history, that used to not be the case. That's been a relatively recent change, and by recent I mean within the last 8 or 9 years. That used to be the exchange used to be on the 26th what the difference with that was is the person who got the second half of Christmas usually got a longer period of time than the person who got the first half. But the legislature and all their infinite wisdom decided that they wanted to try to split the holiday break as close to equal as possible. I mean, it doesn't work that way for every school district, but what they're trying to do is get the days split as equally as possible. So you get that first half of Christmas. I mean, you're not going to get if you get that first half of Christmas, you do get Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, which is important to a lot of people, obviously. But you will not get Thanksgiving in that given year.
Yeah, and I always have clients will ask me, they're like, well, it feels like the parent with the second half of the break gets more time. Typically, that is absolutely true. They're going to get more time, but it's considered an offset. Because if you don't get, especially in, like we talked about, those Christmas years, their kids are small, Santa's, coming to the house, and you're missing that. And if you're missing that, the legislature really looked at that and said, well, as a compensation, even though, we all know there's no way to compensate for time in relation to the experiences, they looked at it and said, to make it more palatable, we're going to give the parent who's missing that a bigger chunk of the Christmas holiday typically. Now, it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes, to your point, Bryan, it is pretty near 50-50. But a lot of times that parent with the second half of that holiday break is going to get more time as an offset.
And it is kind of difficult, especially when you're, like I talked about before, especially when you're in the Santa years. If you get that, that second half of Christmas, if you're in the, you're not going to have the kids on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, but the trade-off is what happens the next year.
Exactly. And so one of the things I always tell clients to contemplate as you're in the process with young children is understand that the statute as crafted, that standard possession schedule language, it's available for modification. So if you've got a great relationship with your ex or soon to be ex, and you say, hey, I want to break up the holidays differently, we can do all kinds of creative things outside the boundaries of that statute by agreement.
Yeah, and to keep in mind that the standard possession order, that we're talking about, always allows for agreements between parties. If you can come to an agreement on something, you can always do whatever you want. If you can come to an agreement, the standard possession order is designed for those situations where you absolutely cannot agree. But I guess the trade-off you're talking about is, let's say you get the Thanksgiving, you get the second half of the Christmas break, the 28th. Through the time the kids go back to school. Well, obviously you missed out on Christmas, but the next year you get the first half of Christmas. So you get the time school that's out until the 28th at noon. However, you do miss out on the Thanksgiving that year, and you do miss out on the second half of Christmas. So the trade-off is odd and even years, but that is, for some people that's very important, and some people obviously celebrate Christmas differently. Some people celebrate opening presents on Christmas Eve. Some people do it on Christmas Day. It's different for everybody. So you got to kind of look at your situation and find something that works for you. I mean, I have a lot of people that still do celebrate the Christmas morning together, especially with younger children, even though they are divorced. So it's something to contemplate, especially if you have a decent relationship with your ex.
Oh, absolutely, Bryan. I've done cases where parents have even, especially if the children are really young and small, like to your point, they'll share that holiday or they'll split the holiday. So like someone may say, and this is an extreme case, but someone said, hey, you know what, I'll take Christmas Eve until 10. And then, the parent came over, they celebrated a little bit together, exchanged gifts between one another. 10 o'clock, they went to the other person's house, and Christmas morning they were there. And they would flip that until the children turned 5. And then at the point they were at 5, they're like, hey, now they're bigger. Let's switch out. Everybody can have kind of holiday time. Now, the counter position to that, I just always tell parents, and I would caution everybody listening, is that consider whatever you put in an order is restrictive, right? When you can't agree, the order controls, to Bryan's point. And so make sure you can live with what's in the order. Because you can always agree to great things, but the order it's going to control. And it's where people get into a lot of trouble a lot of times in the holidays.
Right. And it's very, very difficult to, if somebody's not cooperating during the holidays, I can tell you that it's very, very difficult to find a judge, typically on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day to deal with your issue. wait until after after the first of the year typically, because most of the courts do take time off around the holidays. I mean, there are some. Usually, courts are available for absolute, life-threatening emergencies, but they have to be very, very, very life-threatening emergencies. They're not gonna deal with your possession schedule problems or you're dealing with an angry ex or anything like that. They have to be health or safety, welfare, emergency type issues.
Exactly. So one of the other things I would tell you in relation to the holiday schedule that can become an issue or that parents should contemplate is notice, right? Notice of traveling. So, now the world is a much smaller place. I know, Bryan, you've probably been to, most of the countries in the world.
Don't I wish? Don't I wish?
But I'll tell you, people do travel at the holidays. And a lot of times, a good rule of thumb is just notice the other parent if you're going to be traveling with the children. You never know. Some people may, while it's your period of possession, they may want to be able to drop off gifts or something in the interim so that, Santa gets all the gifts in there in the right time or whatever the case may be. And so that notice can become really important. It's because if you have a poor level of communication, then those are the kind of provisions that you want to contemplate putting in an order to make sure that everybody understands what's going to happen during the holidays.
Plus, if you're traveling, you may not be in a place where you're accessible by Skype or FaceTime or cell phone or whatever. You want to make sure the other person knows that so that, a lot of people, whether you have the kids on Christmas Day or not, you're going to want to talk to your kids. So, make sure that's contemplated because it is important, that to just keep up that line of communication if you don't have your kids for that particular Christmas day.
Oh, without a doubt. And that was one of the things that I was going to touch on is, consider and contemplate electronic access. In today's age, while it's great to be physically and in person, to be able to touch somebody, feel somebody, a lot of times you can experience stuff by agreement. We have FaceTime, we have, social media where you can, post videos or exchange videos so there's just a lot of different things that creatively attorneys and parents can do to help minimize the stress of what can occur during the holidays.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, never, everyone talks, lawyers will always, good lawyers at least, will always talk about being able to co-parent with your ex, especially if you got younger children. Never is co-parenting more necessary than I think during the silly season, during the holidays, because you eventually at some point, you're going to need that person, that ex for something. But you may not think so right now, but you may need that ex for something down the road. And like I said, trying to maintain at least a decent working relationship can make the holidays that much more enjoyable for you and for your kids. I mean, nobody likes fighting and nobody likes going to the courthouse on the holidays.
Now, that's for sure. They always talk about the golden rule. I tell my clients, I want you to apply. Right, the golden rule is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The platinum rule is do unto others as you would do unto yourself. And so, if you're going to handle that situation that's going to be beneficial to you, make sure that you're applying those same rules, especially as parents,
I mean, I can tell you a story that, I had a case one time where the opposing side decided that they didn't like my client, who was the mom, so much so that they attempted to get a temporary restraining order from a judge and they made all kinds of crazy allegations to keep my client from taking the child on her first trip to Disneyland. I mean, absolutely ludicrous. It took us a little bit of time, but, a couple of days, there was a couple of days up in the air right before Christmas before the judge knocked out that temporary restraining order. But it's just one of those things where that probably never should have happened. And, just be aware that sometimes silly things happen in the holidays. And, I say that just to caution you, just never is like Sam said, the platinum rule is where you need to try to work within the confines of holidays.
Couldn't agree more, Bryan. I mean, obviously we want all of our clients, our friends, our family, our listeners to have a happy holiday. And I think this is definitely something that as you think through it, make sure you understand and read your order. If you have questions about the parameters or the provisions that apply, now is the time to be asking. Don't wait till the holiday day or the day of exchange or the day after. Get ahead of those. If you have questions or concerns, contact an attorney, get good counsel, and make smart decisions.
Absolutely. Well, anything else? You got anything else?
No, just other than, I hope you and yours have a great, fantastic holiday. And obviously I'm looking forward to our December version of what we talk about next.
Yes, it's very good to talk to you, and I wish you and yours a safe and happy Thanksgiving. And I appreciate the time, and I really hope listeners you got something out of it. Like said Sam before, Sam said before, it's really a good time to be looking at your order, looking at your situation, and coming up with a plan, for the holidays now before the holidays and the silly season descends upon us. Because being prepared and knowing what your rights are is super important.
Yep, and I look forward to borrowing those $2.8 million socks you're buying.
All right. Well, maybe I'm definitely not going to launder them if I do get them.
All right. Well, it's good talking to you, and I wish everybody a good holiday.
All right. Take care. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the Top Texas Lawyers podcast. If you would like a consultation with either Bryan or Sam, please call 1-888-981-7509 or visit us on the web at astxlegal.com. Once again, that's astxlegal.com. Thank you very much.